Welcome to Primetime Mitch, everybody, and today I have a very special guest with me. I have the actor, composer, producer, and all-round talented man, Lito Velasco. It's good to see you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking me to come on, and even more thanks for pronouncing my first name correctly.
Is that always a problem?
Most people in the United States do a soft T, so they say Lito instead of Lito.
Right, okay. I didn't want to do that. I have thought about it because I thought, you know, do I sound too well-spoken if I pronounce the T? So
I love it. I love it.
Thank you. So basically, I really wanted to get you on here because I've done some research into what you do. And what I want to bring to Primetime Mitch is sort of some awareness of the guys that do your kind of work. You know, not just the acting and the front and center, but the composing and the producing and all the stuff that creates it in the background. So I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you today. What I was just going to say, first of all, because I've had a little bit of a look at your website and everything. I've sort of gone through some of the links you gave me, and thank you so much for giving me so much stuff to look at as well.
Thank you for looking.
Oh, yeah, no, I will say, guys, check out Lito's website because it is so accessible and so easy to use, and there's so much information on there. It's nice to be able to navigate something. What I want to look at first of all, before I go into the other stuff, is you're obviously a very passionate composer.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask a bit of a left field question to start with, just to sort of open us up a bit. But can you remember the first piece of music that you created?
Wow. Yeah. So first of all, just so I'm not remiss, thank you for the compliments on the website. I owe most of that to my wife, Jenny. She pretty much did most of the website design.
Oh, wow.
And then I just kind of made a few suggestions here and there. And then once it was set up, I just kind of ran with it. So thanks to her. The music question, I started playing piano when I was very young. I think I was about 4 or 5 years old. We had a piano in the house. My father plays piano, and he was a former composer himself. And so I would always, as a kid, you know, you see the piano and you want to tinker around on the piano because that's just what kids do. They're curious. And
yeah.
I kind of took to it a little bit more than my sister. I was more interested, and my parents noticed, wow, he's actually like doing things and imitating like songs that he hears and things like that. The first piece of music I would say, composed was I created a kind of story when I was a kid about a haunted house. And then I had my sister read the story, and then I played music to kind of accompany what was happening in the story. Wow. So it was almost like this, I don't know, like performance art thing that we were doing in our household, and I just kind of made up the music. It wasn't written down, obviously, but you know, improvised music counts as composition as well. So that's probably the first piece of music I ever composed. And then from there, it was always music that I was asked to compose in school. I went to a performance arts high school called Interlochen, which is a phenomenal school. If there are any artists watching or any people who have children who are interested in attending an arts high school, look into Interlochen. It's one of the best in the world. And I was lucky enough to be able to go there. And I took a few classes where they asked us to compose, you know, just short pieces for whatever reason. And so I would do those assignments. And that's basically where I started really seriously thinking about, well, can I do this? Do I have any aptitude for this? That sort of thing.
What age were you? You did that thing with your sister with composing the music?
I was probably around 8 or 9. I spent many of the years before that always trying to figure out on the piano stuff that I heard in the movies. One of my favorite films of all time is Raiders of the Lost Ark. When I saw that in movie theaters, it blew my mind, and like that in Star Wars. So I figured out how to play those themes on the piano. I mean, I was one finger playing it because I wasn't good enough to do both parts. But I think that kind of led towards that thing I did with my sister, because I was able to kind of just see what the music was doing. I don't know if that makes sense, but some people can see in their mind, like, the shape of the notes and the shape of the melody. And for some reason, I was able to do that.
I would presume that that kind of method is something you've carried forward.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's interesting because I have a very good friend who's a very learned, studied, educated composer. He studied under John Williams. He studied at, I think, New England Conservatory and Juilliard and all these places. And he's currently, in my opinion, one of the best arrangers in Hollywood in terms of he's able to arrange music, and he conducts Broadway shows when they come to Los Angeles. And he does everything kind of the way John Williams and that generation did. You know, they sit at a piano and they figure it out, then they write it on a music paper, and then they go back to the piano and figure other things out and write it on the music paper. My style is definitely more what I did my whole life. When someone sends me a film, I'll watch it multiple times. I'll try to get a sense of what the story's saying. I'll compare what I think it's saying to what the director's saying. And, you know, we kind of compare notes, and I'll bring up my points, they'll bring up their points. And then when they say go off and compose, I spend at least a week just kind of with the film in my head without touching anything. And I just think about my approach. You know, if I'm eating dinner or watching a TV show like Friends or something that I've seen, you know, a dozen times.
Comfort.
What's that?
Like a comfort program.
Yeah. Something where you don't have to pay attention to the plot, you know? So in my mind, like I'm showering or I'm driving and I'm thinking about what am I going to do? What's going to work? And then after at least a week doing that, I sit down at my synthesizer, which is right over here, and I open up the film in my program, and then I just kind of watch and I try things, and I might record as I'm going, or I might just see like, does this feel right? No, it doesn't. Let's go back, you know, and then I just kind of figure out as I go in that method. I'm not really, because I already have the ideas of what I think is going to work. I just have to figure out the shapes, the melodies, the harmonics, what instruments I think speak to these characters or these situations. It's definitely not quite old school. It's more of a combination of the two, because my friend Dan is very much like, I wish everyone would go back to paper and piano. And I'm like, well, if we did, I would kind of be screwed. Like, I understand where you're coming from, and I could do it if I had to. I don't prefer working that way.
I can totally relate, because one of the reasons as well why I wanted to talk to people like yourself is that personally, I've always been a very creative person, and I've always believed that there's an infinite amount of ideas you can store up there and work from what you have. And I used to do promotional videos for the local wrestling promotion to promote the match that they were showing, the big star match, and I had to go back in time and show how we got there and the history. You see WWE do it all the time. I would find a song. I'd probably do it the reverse way around. I'd find a song and then I'd play it on loop on my ears, and I would try and picture the scenes I was going to put in for each stage of the song. But it was all done up there. There was nothing written down or anything. So I think I'm always interested to find out how other people utilize their creativity, if it's within their head or whether they're surrounded by papers and things like that. But you obviously have an awful lot stored up there to use.
Yeah, I mean, I think I started listening to film scores. I mean, I'm fairly old. I'm going to date the crap out of myself. I was old enough that I saw Star Wars in theaters, the first Star Wars.
Okay.
So that was the first soundtrack that I owned, and I've been listening to film scores and soundtracks since then. And obviously, you know, I've been exposed to a lot of music in that regard. I've been exposed to a lot of music through my education, because I went to Interlock and I went to Juilliard. I went to the Indiana University School of Music. I studied classical repertoire. I performed classical repertoire. So like, I just kind of, there's a database of sorts, and all of that stuff just kind of helps as you go along. And I mean, I think most composers do that, whether they're willing to admit it or not. It's almost impossible at this point in time to write something, in my opinion, that is completely original. We are all influenced in a way by the things and the people that we love. And I know some people really rail against it. They're like, oh, that's plagiarism. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, it's not, as long as you're not directly lifting the melody and using it over again. Like,
I think everything has an inspiration. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was talking the other day to somebody about, and they were like, I can't think of any idea. I can't remember what it was. I think it was, I think they were writing they were trying to write a book or something. And they said, I can't think of anything of my own. I always have to go and try and copy bits of other things. I don't want to do it. I was like, but there's no shame or harm in being inspired by something. Everything comes from something. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that. What I did wonder was, you do other work, obviously, besides the composing. I'm just going to stick with that composing side of things for the time being. Is it music before visuals for you? Are you the most passionate about the sounds?
Wow, that's a great question. I think, no, I mean, I think honestly that the two have to mesh in a way that they are organically intertwined almost, if that makes sense. I don't think either one should necessarily be that much more important than the other. I think the visuals probably take precedent, honestly, and they are slightly more important in many ways, but the music is there to enhance and support the visuals. So to me, it's just as important. And, you know, we just watched a movie recently. I won't say what it is, but I enjoyed the movie for the most part. But to me, the score just didn't fit at all. Like, I kept looking over at my wife and my friend as we were watching it, and I kind of whispered to them. I was like, "Does this music fit, or is it just me? Like, I feel like it's not working at all." And
well, you're a good judge of character on that one, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, again, I like to think maybe I am, but everything is subjective in that regard. So I like to check in and see what other people are thinking. Like, is it just me being picky, or like, you know, because there are instances where I've seen films where the scores just, in my opinion, they don't work at all. That's why I think it's really important that the two almost feel like the importance is almost equal, with, you know, the visuals taking a little bit more importance. And like, one can't exist without the other to a degree. Although I think it's important that the score is also listenable on its own.
I did actually write down, or do they go hand in hand? So I think you've pretty much answered that. I mean, yeah. I have a question it was something I was thinking about recently, very recently.
Mm-hmm.
When you are composing something for a movie, I want to say horror, but I just sort of will go on to that. Not only do you have to think about what kind of sound and that kind of thing, but how do you judge how much to use? Because I think I watched Deliverance the other day. And I also think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the scariest movie ever made, personally, for me, because it's so minimal with the score, because they're out in an isolated area and it almost puts you there. All you can hear is the birds chirping or the crickets. How do you know the amount to put in, and when less is more?
Yeah, that is also a really great question. That's also a very hot topic between my friend Dan and myself, that we actually happen to agree on that. I think a lot of films overutilize score, especially a lot of modern films. I mean, I have a lot of issues with a lot of modern film scores, I hate to say, because we're kind of in this area where we're almost doing soundscapes and tone poems more than we are melodic film scores. And I'm from the school of everything that I write almost everything I write has melodies that are identifiable, and the viewer can almost remember and hum it afterwards. That's part of my goal as a composer. And I think a lot of films, it's just, sometimes it's wall-to-wall music, and I'm sitting there thinking, this scene would benefit so much from silence. Yeah. You know, and I see it a lot in horror films too, where the score is telegraphing what's going to happen. And I'm just like, don't tell us there's a scare coming, you clod. Yeah, like, I totally let the scare come. So what I do is I'll spot the film on my own. I'll write down notes identifying where I think there needs to be score and where I think there doesn't. and then I'll compare it with what the director's saying. And if we're not on the same page, I might say, well, here's why I think we shouldn't use music in this spot, or here's where I think we need music in this spot. What are your thoughts on that? And I've almost always been able to find like a common ground. And if not, there's usually a little bit of compromise, but I've never really had to completely like kind of rehaul something because it just didn't fit what the director was thinking about. I'm very communicative at the start, because if you're not, and they don't have an idea and their idea doesn't match your idea and vice versa, you spend a lot of time on revisions. And I don't mind revisions. It's part of the process. But oh my God, they can be a real pain in the ass when you're composing out of a computer, because it requires a lot of very precise adjusting. And it's kind of like dominoes. You change one thing and it just has this ripple effect that, like, you know, you have to work with the program to make everything fit. And it's much more difficult in that sense than if you're on a stage and you can just take out bars and tell the musicians, skip bar 58, go from 57 to 59, and we'll be good. So I just try to make sure that my spotting notes match the director's, and again, that it's serving the story, it's serving the drama. It's not telegraphing the drama. And if it is telegraphing it, it's telegraphing it because the viewer knows that the shit is going to hit the fan. Like they're waiting for it. They're like, this film is called Final Girls Bloodbath. Like, at some point there's going to be a bloodbath. So like in that sense, I think it's okay. But in other senses, I see films where they're just telegraphing everything. And it's like, that was a total shock. Why did you tell us before it even happened?
I would imagine sometimes it's better to go to almost match the feeling of the viewer as opposed to tell them how to feel.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a great saying that film scoring should match what the character is thinking, not what the character is doing. Now, okay, in some regards, you can go against that. Like when you watch a Home Alone film, the music is almost cartoonish when it gets down to the scenes where Kevin's like wailing on the bad guys. But it has to be, because those situations are so comedic and cartoonish. That music is playing to what's happening. And there are circumstances where that is absolutely required, I think. But in general, you don't want to necessarily tell, I think, the viewer how to feel. You just want to support what the film is showing them.
Couldn't have explained that any better. Well, I mean, was that, when you're talking about the communication with the director, was that the case when you had the opportunity with Found?
That's an interesting question too. Found is one of these, I think it was probably my second assignment in film scoring, if I'm not mistaken, my second real assignment. The writer, Scott Shermer, lived in Bloomington, Indiana, which is where Indiana University is. I met him at a job that we both worked at a movie theater, and he was my manager. So we went way, way, way back. And I knew Scott was pursuing filmmaking. And one day out of the blue, he just kind of contacted me and he said, I have a couple scenes in this film that, you know, the composer and I just haven't been able to figure it out. They have to move on to another assignment because they just don't have time. And I was like, hey, I get it. Like, you have to do what you have to do. But now I need music. Would you be willing to take a crack at it? And of course, knowing it was a feature film, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to do that. And he basically said, look, it's just 2 scenes. Let me send them to you. Let me send them to you without music. Let me send them to you with the temp track. Then you get back to me. And we communicated a lot before I started tackling those scenes. And yeah, I mean, I absolutely wanted to make sure that Scott and I were on the same page and that what I was doing was exactly what he and the story needed, especially because there had been a few attempts before I was asked to step in. So I had to really ask him, like, what was being done that you feel didn't necessarily work? That the music wasn't bad, it just wasn't what you were thinking should be utilized in these scenes, because I don't want to make those same choices. Yeah. So yeah, communication is key. And it's often difficult because directors and producers and writers, some of them really know how to communicate in terms of the lingo of music. Some of them really don't. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you know, it's not necessarily the easiest thing if you're not a musician. But what I try to do is I try to find common ground in terms of our communication so that they can tell me exactly what they're thinking, you know, and give me some examples. And I don't expect, I tell them, I don't expect you to be an expert and be able to use the lingo that I use. I just need to know what's going on in your head to a degree so that I don't give you something that's completely in the opposite direction. And even if that happens, there have been times where I have, and they've been like, whoa, I never would have thought of this, but this actually works. Let's go down this route.
I think maybe with you being given 2 scenes, that's almost like easing you in. You're not thrown right in the deep end with, so maybe that ends up benefiting you in the long run. Like, but I think there's a lot of good things about that movie as well. Just from a face value as a viewer, I thought some of the narration in it was fantastic, and I mean, I'd love to know which was your input in there.
The soundtrack?
Yeah, I can remember it quite well.
So the scenes that I was assigned were the scene where they go to the train out in the middle of nowhere, and the kid flicks on the light and the kind of carnival music starts. Oh, yeah. So I did that entire scene up into them running away into the fields where the person's, you know, kind of shaking the fist and yelling at them. And then I also did the music, it's the music coming from the videotape that they're watching of the creature that comes out of the water and kills the couple on the beach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the scenes. I'm now going to have to go back and listen to them. Yeah. I mean, I'd actually watched that when I agreed to do this, because I really wanted to find out sort of a bit about what you'd done. Because some of the things I'm not massively familiar with the Hellraiser documentary, purely because I wasn't a big fan of it, but that was me at the age of 14 or something. I'm going to go and revisit them again because I do find like Clive Barker's work fascinating, so I do want to try and delve into that and enjoy it a bit more. So if I do, the next stop would be the documentary, to which I could see your work in that as well, which I'm looking forward to. In fact, actually, I'm staring at that's a book on my shelf at the moment, which I
nice.
Yeah, so,
I think hopefully you'll enjoy the documentary. It's very thorough, and for me it was a pleasure because Hellraiser is it's actually one of my favorite scores of all time. It's one of the reasons that Chris Young and I, who are actually friends now, which kind of always kind of blows my mind when I think about it. When I first met him, you know, I told him, I was like, Hellraiser is one of my primary influences in terms of why I started exploring film scoring.
Wow. Well, I was going to ask you as well, 'cause I'm pretty sure you must have been asked this 1,000 times over, but what actually, was it like a family thing that pulled you into horror? Was it like something from way back?
Well, a little of both. My father has always been a big horror fan. His generation, of course, he grew up with Universal Studios monsters, you know, Frankenstein and the Wolfman and all the greats. You can't really see it, but on the top shelf of this cabinet over here, we have 12-inch figures of all the classic Universal monsters.
Oh my God. You see, that's the next step in this makeshift stuck together studio I've tried to create. That I want some stuff like that. I think the only Universal thing I have in here at the moment is my Creature from the Black Lagoon VHS.
Nice.
That's the only thing I have at the moment.
So, yeah, my father loved horror films. Whenever my mom was working and he could get away with it, he would rent horror movies to show my sister and myself, and the three of us absolutely loved watching horror. And then when I was 7 years old, my babysitter, Desi, made the mistake of letting us watch Halloween when it premiered on NBC in 1981.
Your babysitter.
Yeah.
The
I've
irony.
actually written a couple. I know, right? I actually wrote a couple of articles on horror websites about that experience because it was such a forming foundational experience in terms of my life, because Halloween is my favorite film of all time. And that experience scared the shit out of me, but I couldn't take my eyes off of the screen. Like I really, really was terrified, because I was like, I'm watching a movie about babysitters getting murdered in the Midwest, and I'm sitting in the Midwest with a babysitter. So,
Perfect.
yeah, I mean, it was, repelling in one way, but it was also completely enchanting in another.
That is the equivalent of watching Jaws on a boat. That's just fantastic.
Yeah, so that sort of started my obsession with Michael Myers.
Oh, yes.
And, that's basically what cemented, I think, in many ways, my love of horror. And then shortly after, 3 years later, I discovered A Nightmare on Elm Street, and that pretty much sealed the deal.
You have very, very similar taste. My partner and I, she is a huge Halloween fan, and Halloween's her favorite horror, and Nightmare on Elm Street's mine. So we have this lovely contrast all through the house.
Okay.
Now, I watched that last Christmas, and then I watched it again on Sunday.
Okay.
I've got to ask you, because this is sort of a big deal, I imagine, for you to go and do something like this, because you have such a fondness for Freddy and Michael and those kind of guys.
Yep.
I imagine, I'm just, forgive the light, I can't see my notes.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
You mentioned, I can imagine you be inspired by those performances. When the cameras roll and you're playing this killer, do you envision them? Do you envision being them, or are you completely trying to create something new?
So it just depends on the character. In the case of All Through the House, I did draw inspiration from certain actors, certain masked actors especially. I definitely drew a little bit of inspiration from Nick Castle. I definitely took a little bit of inspiration from Ted White and Richard Brooker, from Kane Hodder, from the Prowler. I watched a lot of stuff like that I kind of grew up with all that stuff. So I knew it already, but I just kind of really made sure to study even more these performances. And I've been cosplaying as Michael Myers since the mid 90s. I actually got hired to do it. I've been hired to go to three weddings this fall, where I'm just roaming the crowd as Michael Myers.
I noticed you did the theme parks as well, and I said to my partner last year that my dream job would be to be Freddy Krueger in one of those walk through scare experiences. I've always wanted to do that, and so yeah, that I'd envy you for being able to do that.
That was a definite thrill, because my friend who did the makeup, he was in charge of the makeup department. He actually got to use the appliances that Robert used in Nightmare 5, because we're friends with David Miller. So David provided sets of that makeup to us. So I got to wear the same. That was surreal. Growing up, being obsessed with Freddy Krueger, being a Fredhead, and getting to live that experience, and getting to channel Robert, and getting to use his mannerisms.
That's what I wanted to do.
It was surreal. But I mean, yeah, if I do a masked character, I definitely draw upon other performances, but I usually funnel them into something original. To me, this character, I don't want to, spoiler warning, come back in like a minute and a half. To me, the character necessitated having some of the classic elements of those performances, but it also necessitated having a duality of male and female, feminine and masculine. And I tried to show that, in different ways. I'm not sure if it necessarily came through. Hopefully it did. But I definitely, I'm always influenced to a degree. I'm not ashamed to admit that. Even my comedic acting is influenced by Don Knotts and Michael J. Fox, and these people that have incredible timing and have this legacy of just being unbelievable comedians. Like, I watch them and I'm like, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. I like that. And then you kind of turn it into your version of it, and that's what I try to do with basically any role to a degree.
I definitely think it came through, because I thought straight away that in that movie he had sort of a tremendous naivety about him.
Yeah.
Where he just, it didn't look like he experienced anything or knew who he was. And and I'm presuming that's what you wanted to show off.
Yeah, that there's an aggression, but it's almost an unexplainable aggression, and that those dualities come through instinctual behaviors that even this character can't necessarily explain, but he has to express them somehow, usually in the form of violence. But yeah, he's definitely not a seasoned pro. I mean, he's not Michael Myers or, Jason Voorhees by the time they get to their 7th film. He's figuring out as he goes, or it is figuring out as it goes, however you want to.
I never really knew what to say there because it's complicated.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it too badly for people.
Of course not. You did give the spoiler warning though, so I think it's been a minute and a half. So you're safe. Just on the subject of that movie, are you a fan of festive horror?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you can create something that ties into holidays in any way whatsoever, I think it's such a gift to the fan base, and it's such a gift to the artists that are participating in it for a myriad of reasons. The first is, I love when a holiday comes along and I'm able to say, it's Valentine's Day. Jenny, and I have a tradition. We watch My Bloody Valentine, the 2009. We watch Valentine, and then if we have enough energy or it's not too late, we'll watch the original My Bloody Valentine. We have traditions for Halloween. We have traditions for Thanksgiving now, which I love that we have a Thanksgiving one. We have all these Christmas horrors that we love, Black Christmas, and all these classics.
I love Christmas horrors. I'm a huge fan of Silent Night, Deadly Night, and Black Christmas. I think is an all-time classic. Actually, that's reminded me. Your movie was called All Through the House. It reminded me of there was a Tales from the Crypt program in Britain in 1972 with John Collins in the first. It's an anthology of stories. I think they're like 15 minutes long, each one of them. And her story is called All Through the House. And she's being stalked outside by this escaped inmate dressed as Santa Claus. So that's the first. As soon as I saw the title when I was looking through the listings, I want to see that.
And I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, they redid that episode in the American version of some show. It might have been Tales from the Crypt. I can't remember the actress, but I know that the evil Santa was portrayed by Larry Drake from Darkman. Oh. And it might have the exact same title, which makes me wonder if it's the exact same story remade.
Well, I know what I'm doing after this.
So people would always bring that up whenever they would talk about our film. And we would say, yeah, of course, we knew about that. We watched it. We love it. But these holiday seasonal horrors are a gift to the fans because it gives them a tradition. They're a gift to the people involved in making them because every year we pop back into the zeitgeist for a month or two, which is always thrilling for us because we get people that reach out to us to say like, oh my God, I love your work. And oh my God, can I have you on my show? And of course I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm not really anybody, but sure. I'm always going to be willing to talk about stuff.
A very modest man as well, it seems. No, honestly, I think as well. And what's great is you were right. The more of these movies come out, because there's been a few, It's a Wonderful Knife and things like that came out. And what it is doing for me from a channel perspective and a content creating perspective is it's giving me a chance to expand my rankings, because I watched All Through the House just after I'd done my top 5 Christmas horrors. And I was like, I would have put that in. So now I can go, right, well, this year I'm going to expand it to 10 and I'll do a top 10 because there's so much being churned out now. I think it's so good for film fans and film industry in general.
Yeah, and it's great for horror because, horror never dies. Entertainment goes through cycles. Horror goes through cycles in the way it's presented and in the tone and the kind of style of horror. But horror never dies, and it never dies because most horror films are not that expensive to make, and people always crave it for a variety of reasons, obviously. So, yeah, I love it. The more we have, the better it is for everyone that really focuses on the genre. So I'm thumbs up on that thought as well.
Are you a self-critic? Do you analyze your own performance?
Yes.
I knew that was going to be a yes.
Yeah. I know people would say, oh yeah, right. I don't like watching myself act. When I watch certain things that I've composed the music for, sometimes it's difficult when I get to certain sections of the film because the emotions I was feeling when composing that score are still very present. There's a short film that's making its way through festivals all around the world right now called 𝗏𝗏𝗏, and it was directed by Michael Granberry, who's a stop motion animator.
Ah.
He and I met on Never Sleep Again because he did the interstitials and the main titles with the claymation kind of stuff.
Brilliant.
Yeah, he's incredible. He's such a visionary. He's such an incredible genius artist. And he hired me to act in a short film that he did after Never Sleep Again. And then he approached me with this stop motion film that I did the score for. And I'm thrilled because it's getting so much love. He's thrilled because it's getting so much love. And really, it was basically just the two of us. But the reason I'm bringing this up is I was going through a really tough time emotionally when I was writing the music for this film. And when I get to a certain part in the movie, I almost have to leave the room. Like, it screened at a film festival this weekend and I couldn't leave the room. Because like they knew I was there and they knew I was the composer and I didn't want to just get up and leave.
No, of course.
So I'm sitting there watching it and it gets to this point and I had to like look up in the air and I had to like do this kind of deep breathing because I start to feel those emotions again. So it's not necessarily a critic thing in some cases. It's just, it's a case of I've done that. It's out there. I don't necessarily want to go back to it if I don't have to in some cases. And in some cases, it's just a case of I don't want to watch my acting because I feel like there are things I could have done better or I could have done differently that might have enhanced the scene.
I think that is as normal as possible. I mean, even doing these videos on the channel, I still look back and go, wish I had said that. You know, I wish I'd turned and looked that way, or I wish I'd edited that. It's just, I suppose if you don't think like that, you can't really progress or get any better. So it's a healthy way to think.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Never Sleep Again, because when I found that, I have never been so continuously happy for days on end, because I thought it was such a long documentary because it got so much to get through and they're so thorough. I thought, well, I'll watch a movie a day. I'll watch the coverage of each movie, but I'll do it daily so I can spread it out across a week. And I thought it was wonderful, and like I said, the intros with the stop motion was amazing. The music and the score that went along with it felt like a movie in itself. It was just brilliant. I can't imagine. That's why I'm going to ask. But your experience working on that?
Yeah, that was pretty mind blowing. I was lucky enough to be asked to participate by one of the directors, Dan Farrens. He invited me to be a part of it because he knew I was just a massive horror fan, but more importantly, he knew I was kind of an encyclopedia of Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, if we were on set and people couldn't necessarily remember something, they didn't want to necessarily put the movie in because it took time. So they would say, ask Lito, like for a detail, like, do you remember in this scene what they were wearing? And I would say, yes. It was this. And I'm not saying that to sound like a braggart or anything, but if you've watched Fredheads or anybody that's seen Fredheads, I talked about winning a Freddy Krueger trivia contest on the phone. So like, that's just the kind of memory I have. But it was mind blowing because of course I got to see and most of the time meet almost every single person that we interviewed. So all of these moments were just these kind of like mind-blowing moments of, I can't believe I'm sitting in a room with Wes Craven, or I can't believe I'm in Robert Englund's house, or I can't believe that I'm talking face to face with Charles Bernstein about composing for film. And, you know, it was unbelievable. And I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Dan for that experience.
I can't imagine. I mean, I've had sort of situations before where because I'm a big wrestling fan, I've met wrestlers who I've always wanted to meet. I met Ric Flair, and I was like awestruck, and I didn't quite know what to do, and I hated being starstruck, you know, because I feel very weak. But I can't imagine being sat in a room with Wes Craven. That just doesn't compute with me. And can you ever come down from that?
I mean, kind of, not really. I actually have a picture of he and I that we took on the set when we interviewed him for Never Sleep Again. And then shortly after, we interviewed him for Scream Inside Story. And I had the photograph printed, and I asked him to sign it. So it's hanging on the wall in our apartment. I see it every single day. And every time I see it, I just kind of look at it and I'm like, I can't believe how lucky I am. And also, real quick, I want to go back and make sure I say this. Every single person that worked on Never Sleep Again was an encyclopedia of fandom of Nightmare on Elm Street to a degree. I just happen to be the ultra obsessive, along with Tommy Hudson, fan that just, I don't know why, it's just so ingrained in our brains that like we just kind of live it almost. And every single person that was involved was extremely talented. They brought their A game. And I think that's why people responded to the film the way they did. There's love, but there's such exceptional talent involved and such passion that I don't know how it could have turned out otherwise.
You can tell because of just how deep they go into it. And what a lovely touch as well at the end to have everybody re-quoting the lines from the movie. I just thought it was wonderful. Is that the same Dan that's involved in Halloween 6?
Yes, Dan Farrens wrote the screenplay for Halloween 6.
Because that's one of my favorite Michael Myers performances. George P. Wilbur's performance. I love his performance in that. And I've always. I'm not saying it's up at the top of my favorites, but I've never disliked it at all. You know, I've always thought that one sort of got better every time I watched it, particularly the producer's cut.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's a hot topic with me and some friends who insist that the theatrical cut is better, and I'm always like, I like the producer's cut better. Right? But mine has a lot to do with nostalgia, because when I first saw it, it was the kind of thing where I had to contact someone on the internet, send them a cashier's check, and have them send me a VHS back of this bootleg. And that's how I first saw it in college. And so I have very, very, very strong nostalgia attached to that experience. And that's actually why Dan and I started working together, because I met him at a convention and I was gushing over how much I loved Halloween 6. One of my work emails is actually a reference to Terrence Mitchell's character in the film. I have the thorn tattoo on my wrist because my alter ego is Michael Myers. So I love that film too. I know it gets a lot of hate, but I find it entertaining. I find it atmospheric. I think Michael's really intimidating in the film. I love Paul Rudd. There's something so touching about Donald's performance through the entire film. And I'm right there with you.
I'm glad to hear that. I need more love for that movie because it's actually a nice memory. I think a lot of, with horror, some movies are badly rated, but there's always nostalgia attached to some of them. I mean, even Freddy's Dead for me is the first VHS horror that my parents ever bought me when they decided just let him watch horror if he wants to watch horror. So that's the first one I was ever bought, and I still like some of the ideas in that movie as well. So it's just I can go back and go, well, it might not be liked universally, but it's a special place in there for me.
Yeah, and I refer to that as nostalgia tinted glasses.
Yes.
And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it, especially if we can be honest and say, okay, look, it's not the best film in the world. It's not the best film in the franchise, but I love it because. And I try to do most of my fandom logic in that regard. Like I tried, like even Batman and Robin, which people hate. There's a lot of stuff in that movie that I really, really love, like the costumes, the music, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a personal hero of mine. Like there's just a lot of things that I absolutely find completely enchanting and entertaining. So I will defend that movie till the day I die. I'm not saying it's a great movie, everybody, but I love it for my own reasons.
I noticed actually you just brought Arnie up there. I saw the photo you put on earlier.
Oh yeah,
I have a friend.
Happy birthday!
Yes, absolutely, happy birthday. There's going to be an image pop up there in the edits. Don't worry, a huge Arnie head.
Happy birthday, Arnold!
That was very good.
Thank you.
The only time I featured Terminator in any of my videos was I did scary scenes in non-horror, and one of them is the nuclear war attack in the second one, because that absolutely terrifies me. So yeah, I know. Yeah. And I don't think that the second one is as much of a horror. That's why I put it in. I think the first one is, but I think they veer off towards more sci-fi action from them.
Yeah.
I would like to ask just a couple more things.
No, go please. I have plenty of time.
I don't even know what time it is now. It could even be tomorrow. I don't know. When you produce and compose a score for a fan film, how different is your approach to a feature film?
It's really not that different at all. I think the only difference is I really lean as heavily as I can into pre-existing material if it exists for something that is iconic, that is a franchise, that is extremely well known by the public. I actually have a real problem when I watch films that exist in a universe that is well known by the public and they don't utilize pre-existing themes. It actually bothers the shit out of me. And I know that certain composers do it because of hubris. Certain composers do it because they're like, well, I didn't want to just repeat what came before. There's a lot of reasons why they don't, but I really lean on it as much as I can. And the reason is I use this example often. So if anybody watching's heard me speak before, I'm sorry I'm repeating this example. But when I saw GoldenEye for the first time years and years ago, I was excited. I was thrilled because I loved Pierce Brosnan. I grew up with Remington Steele. And I had been saying for years, I was like, they should hire this guy to be James Bond. He is James Bond. Like, just look at the guy. Yes. So when they hired him, I was so psyched. And then I went into the theater, and about half an hour into the film, I was like, what the f is going on with this music? Like it just doesn't seem to fit the world of James Bond at all. And I know they were reinventing the character for a new era, so I respect what the composer's approach was. But to me, it made zero sense because everything that had come before musically leaned into that style. So on the next film, when they hired David Arnold, and he just leaned as hard into John Barry and Monty Norman as he could, I was like, this is what James Bond should always sound like. I don't care what the film is. I don't care who the actor is. I don't care what the era is. It's too iconic. It'd be like doing an Indiana Jones film without, dun, ba, ba, ba. Like, if you don't hear that, you're going to be like, what the hell, So I tend to use as much pre-existing material as I can without like making it my entire score. I'll nod to melodies here and there, or I'll approach the score using the same sonic palette as something that came before. But in terms of the approach to the music, it's the same. I'm just approaching it in the exact same way because it's the same kind of filmmaking in a way. It's just truncated. So I feel like, well, this is a shorter version of one of the sequels in a way. So why would I not approach this the way that the composers who came before did, or the way that I would score a sequel if I was doing a feature film sequel? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I suppose you would take if you change it and do something totally different, you'd almost take away a bit of its identity. I think I'd noticed you did Don't Fall Asleep, didn't you?
Yeah.
I could tell that you can hear Bernstein's score in there, but it's slightly modified. And you still keep the essence and the atmosphere. It's just a little bit different, a little bit of a twist. And I think that's what I noticed with your score in that one is you were just you were using the same bass and the same foundations. You were just dropping some of your own touch in there.
Yeah, and there's, if you really dig deep into that score, there's a nod to Alice's theme because we see Alice as a young girl in the film. There's a nod to the Hypnosil theme from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 when Craig Wasson is looking up Hypnosil on the computer. I use the exact same motif. There's a nod to Chris's score for Nightmare 2. There's all kinds of like Easter egg kind of themes kind of peppered throughout. But the basis of the score, as you said, is the sound of Charles Bernstein's original score, the same synth, the same kind of orchestration. And the one thing I'd love to talk about this because it was such an honor. The one thing about that film that I really knew, I was like, I can't believe I get to do this. I cannot f this up. I actually wrote a theme for Nancy Thompson that it's kind of slowly grows and evolves throughout the course of the film. But when we finally see the epilogue of her in the beautiful dream, sorry, spoiler alert, that's the full statement of the theme of Nancy Thompson, that no one has ever written an actual theme for Nancy before. And I actually wrote it to be harmonically and melodically reflective and intertwined with Freddy and the nightmare theme. Like, because Freddy's nightmare theme is dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
That's the theme we associate with the nightmare and Freddy Krueger. Well, if you watch that film and you watch the beautiful dream, the beautiful dream sequence, you'll hear a theme that's this kind of soft piano with like very quiet grieving strings underneath it. But the theme is very much going to make fans go, oh, that kind of sounds like the nightmare, but it's prettier, it's softer. There's something gentle about it. And that was just such an exceptional honor, just because it really hadn't been done before. So I was like, she deserves a theme. This character needs a theme.
See, I've always wondered how you do that, because I mean, I'm not massively music. I play acoustic guitar, and I could sing a bit of country music before I had a tonsillectomy. But I know it's kind of, I try not to think about it.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, but I'm not tremendously up on music, but I always wondered sometimes when you are taking a score that exists and you want to make it similar, I always wonder how much of it is just sort of changing the key.
For me, I lean into the key. Like if you watch The Confession of Fred Krueger or Don't Fall Asleep, a lot of that score is centered in the key of D minor. And the score of D minor is the original key of the original Nightmare on Elm Street theme. So to me, it had to kind of exist in that key. To me, the differences come more in the orchestration, the shapes of the melodies, where they're slightly similar, but they're just kind of different. That's how I differentiate a little more.
I remembered The Confessions of Fred Krueger now. I just that's actually a really fantastic score, because just in one room and like an interrogation, you can only do so much with that, and to get the maximum out of that atmosphere in that room was very, very good.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I always, and the reason I asked the key question as well is that, like, and how you modify an existing tune, because one of the things that I found fascinating, I think it's on the Never Sleep Again, when the Bernstein score, where he says he just puts in a note that doesn't belong. Yeah, to make you feel sort of uneasy and unsettled and like, oh, this doesn't feel right, you know. And I think that's fantastic. Yeah,
it's you know, when you put in something that's dissonant or a note that doesn't belong in the actual like bass scale, it registers on a level that people might not even be aware of, but it definitely affects them internally, emotionally. And it's a very kind of easy trick to use. I'm not going to say it's a trick, but you know what I mean? It's one of our tools that we can lean on when we want to kind of make it feel like things are settled, but I don't know, something's kind of weird here. What's going on? Oh my God. Like, you know,
it's like an audio version of what Wes said about the red and the green sweater, and the eye doesn't compute that those two colors go together. It's the same in that sense with the music, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh, okay. That all makes tons of sense now. A little question about you. What do you do in your downtime? And I'm not buying that you surf in the Myers mask and do that kind of thing in your spare time. So what do you do to sort of relax when the pressure's off?
I lift weights a lot. I'm in the gym 3 to 4 days a week lifting weights. I watch my favorite films. I spend time with my beautiful, strong, incredibly funny and smart wife. I like to, you know, I'm a big sports guy, which, you know, people are sometimes surprised by. They're like, wait, you're an artist and kind of a nerd. Why do you like sports? But I'm originally from Chicago, so I'm a huge Cubs fan.
Okay.
You know, just a lot of different things. I have a lot of different interests. It's one of the reasons why, even though I came out here kind of primarily focusing on one field, the more I discovered that work was coming to me from other directions, the more I just kind of, because initially I was like, I don't know if I want to do all these different things because then I'm not really going to be identified. And Hollywood really likes to identify your niche. And that was kind of scary at first. It was like, should I be doing this? But I'd be an idiot to turn down opportunities and work. So I just kind of went with it. But I mean, in my downtime, I do all those things. I cosplay. You know, I love to go to every fall. We do Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios, and we buy the multi-night ticket, so we go multiple times. Just that kind of stuff.
I do living stuff in the wrong place.
Well, fly out some fall, and if you do, contact me.
I'd only been to America once when I was 18 for a couple of weeks as a holiday, and I finally got to go in April because I went to watch WrestleMania in Philadelphia. I did 5 days in Philly and 5 days in New York, and that felt more like what I wanted to do. I felt more at home in a place that's got so much going on, and particularly like where you are, like Universal. I mean, I should spend all my time somewhere like that. So that's my plan in the long run, is to just try and make a success of this and actually do something with my life for once. It's crazy how much time's wasted.
We only have one life to live, so we might as well pursue the things that we love. I did something similar when I first came out to LA in 2004 because I was working the 40, 50-hour job and for 40, 50 hours a week job. And it was soul sucking in a way. Yeah. Like I wasn't getting anything out of it other than, you know, cash. And I'm one of those people that I understand the need for money, but I'm not a big fan of the concept of money.
No.
I know that sounds kind of like, oh, he's such an idealist, but it's like, I would rather be doing the things that I love or using what I know I can give the world in a way that's giving something back or expanding on these things that we love, or is at least printing, you know, some kind of mark in this genre legacy of horror and all these fandoms. I mean, I'm a fan of all these, like Batman and Spider-Man and Indiana Jones. And like,
you're very varied, I've noticed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our office is basically a reflection of all the things that we love. There's an original Clue poster on the wall here because she's a massive fan of the Clue film. She has Twister posters. I've got a Michael Keaton Batman cowl. Again, you only live once. If you can do it and you can pursue it, I always tell people, go for it. At least try it. Because if you don't try it, in 40, 50, however many years, you're going to be like, why didn't I at least give it a shot? And I'm not going to say it's easy. No. Like, I still can't provide for both of us on my own. And that has always been the goal, because I know that this industry can pay the kind of money that does. But if I don't ever get to that point, at least I can say that I spent my life trying and doing things that I knew were utilizing the gifts that I have.
That is exactly the mindset I've been in. It's like I know I'm not exactly stable at the moment. My partner works really hard and is doing great work for both of us at the moment, while I'm trying to find my feet. Because I'm doing courses and things to try and learn about digital marketing and things like that. I just want some knowledge in me that I haven't had before. But I do think if money should not be your sole reward.
No.
And I want to, at least I can say now that even if I've had 18 years of just doing basic stuff, in that time, I somehow managed to squeeze in a lot of very exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather have had that along the way than just sort of succumb to the 9 to 5 every day, go to bed, wake up, work, go back to bed, work, that kind of loop. I didn't ever want to get into that anymore. And this moving here has been the best thing I've ever done. Even this now, it's stuck on the walls. It's supposed to be like it's the bit in the middle before I get to where I want to be.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, it's a walk before you can run.
It's inspiration, but it's also reminder. That's what I think about a lot of this stuff as. There's a wall to my left that you can't see that has photographs of me with all the very, not to brag, but well-known film composers that I've met.
That's not bragging.
John Williams is up there. Harry Manfredini's up there. Alan Silvestri is up there. Christopher Young is up there. I mean, I've been lucky to encounter these people and talk to them and in some cases work with them. And in some cases, I can call them good friends like Harry and Chris Young. And I mean, that happens because you're following your heart. You're following what your soul is telling you to do. And it leads you to these places that you're often like, why is this happening? Like this is not, do I deserve this? Like, should this be happening? This is so cosmically bizarre to be existing in this moment face to face with Alan Silvestri, asking him about the Avengers score. But it happens because you're really leaning into what you love. And I encourage people who are artists to do that as much as they can. And I should also say, I'm not bashing people who work 9-to-5 jobs, 40 hours, 50 hours a week. That's amazing. That's amazing that people do that. My wife does that. I owe her so much because she does do that.
Same.
And I'm glad that there are people that do that and they're happy. I think that's incredible. I just couldn't do it for myself. I tried it. I've tried it multiple times. I even got a 9-to-5 job here in LA. And I was doing that while I was working on the Never Sleep Again book with Tommy. And I just couldn't do it. Like, it just, every day felt like almost punishment, no matter how much I tried to be optimistic.
We should have had this discussion long ago. You were saying everything that I was thinking. I mean, I'd created a business. Well, I'll talk about this some other time, but I created a business and I was running that through the day. And then I was stopping doing that. And then I was going to work nights at UPS.
Oh, man.
And then I would get up in the morning, I'd be run down, I'd be tired, I'd be sore, and then I'd do it all again. And there is nothing, I mean, I like people that work hard and bring in and bring in money for their families and things like that. I mean, that is, I love grafting hard, but I've got to this point now where I feel like I've paid my dues. Yeah. And now I want to try something new while I'm still somewhat youthful. I'm on the cusp of 40 now, so I can't really, I can't afford to waste any more time. And yeah, I'm really glad you've said some of that stuff because it just sort of brings it out of my head, you know, and it's not just bottled up.
Well, I'm glad that I could do that.
Yes, thank you. I didn't know this would be somewhat of a therapy session.
We're getting all philosophical.
Well, Lito, thank you honestly for answering. I mean, I've given you a ton of questions there, and you've just breezed through them, and it was a joy, and it's just very inspirational to see just how much you can do if you just have a thimbleful of talent at the beginning and then you expand it. You know, it was brilliant. I really enjoyed chatting to you today.
I enjoyed speaking to you. I'm always honored that anyone wants to talk to me. And I love just discussing art. I love discussing the genre. I love discussing filmmaking and music. And before I go, I also want to be sure I say to people, thank you for watching, if you're watching. And if you go to my website and check things out there, thank you very much. Feel free to drop me an email, either there or on YouTube or on Instagram. I love talking to people. I love talking to fellow fans because I still consider myself a fan first. And please do us a favor. When our short film, Final Girls Bloodbath, becomes available, wherever it becomes available, because we're not sure if it's going to end up on Shudder or we don't know, but when it does, horror fans, please check it out. My wife and our friend Ashley and I and other people worked really hard on that film on a micro budget, and we're very proud of the film. And I think horror fans will really enjoy it.
You were 10 steps ahead of me there. I was going to say, please, would you like to tell us where we can find your stuff and your links? But yes, I will put these in the description below, all the links to your website, to your socials, if people want to go see what you do, because I mean, it's just well worth it. And I've been listening to your scores all day, so.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah, go do that, please. Thank you very much to everyone that has watched. If you enjoyed this, please drop some stuff in the comments below, talk to us, and check out Lito's links. He is a very talented man that deserves a lot of acknowledgement and recognition. Thank you, guys. drop a like down below, smash that notification bell and subscribe button, and I will catch you later on in the week. This has been Lito Velasco, and this has been Primetime Mitch. Bye, everybody.